How many leads can I expect? That's a question that we get often from prospects. And before I jump into how the question I respond back to them with, I want to assume that you're an AI tech consulting or SaaS firm and you're tired of relying on referrals, feast or famine sales cycles, and you just want to learn how to attract high intent, qualified prospects. And if that's the case, you're in the right place. My name is Terrence Branley. I am the co-founder of Grow IT Partners. I also host the Grow IT podcast. And all we talk about in this channel is how you can grow your tech firm. So if that's you, hit the subscribe button down there, but let's jump in. So when I get asked that question, how many leads can I expect? And that's usually in response to our 60-day accelerator program. The first question I ask them back is, how do you define a lead? Because I know there's a lot of different industry jargon and terms out there, MQLs, SQLs, marketing qualified lead versus sales qualified lead versus an opt-in versus a form fill. And I can tell you the only metric that we care about is qualified meetings. And I'll go back to that in a second. Qualified meetings are the only thing that we found that directly correlates into revenue. And that's really all that matters when it comes to investing into marketing. Investing your dollars into marketing is, if I input X dollars in, what is the amount that I can expect out? Now, what is a qualified meeting? Let's just jump into that real quick. Our definition of a qualified meeting is meeting with a very specific ICP who has a very specific problem of which you have a very specific solution. And that prospect has to go through a series of responding to an ad that is aimed at them to answer qualifying questions and make sure that they actually have the specific problem, that they have the budget, that they have the decision-making process, and that they then show up on a meeting, right? Because we know that if you get 10 of those meetings, that you can expect to close 2 to 3 of them, right? And that's going to directly translate to revenue. So that's the only metric that we really track is qualified meetings. Okay, now lead volume, right, depends entirely on what is your offer going out to a cold market, to a cold prospect. This is different if you've grown your firm from referrals or network leads. This is completely different. There is a lot of inherent trust that gets transferred when you get a referral or a network lead. This is creating an offer, and we help our clients do this. Help create an offer that is able to go out to a cold prospect who doesn't know, like, and trust you. And you will find out that if that has market resonance, if your offer has market resonance, again, the 3 major components are a very specific ideal client profile, a very specific problem of which you have a very specific solution. That is like component number 1 in terms of lead volume. If you have that with those 3 components, you're in good shape. From there, then it just becomes a math equation. It's how much you are willing to spend on a daily basis into paid ads. And it becomes a scalable system, right? Because when you understand those qualified meetings and you have a cost per qualified meeting and you apply a close rate, a sales close rate to that, you have a direct correlation between inputs of marketing dollars and outputs, which is revenue that you generate from it. Okay, let's jump into the client lifetime value and client acquisition costs, which are really the 2 only metrics that you need to know when you go to invest marketing dollars. Your client lifetime value is what you should know already, right? And that is essentially what is the lifetime value on average of each of your clients, right? There's certain ones that'll spend more with you over time. There's certain ones that'll spend less, but on average. Once you understand that client lifetime value, then you can understand what you're able to go out to the market in order to buy a new client acquisition cost, to pay for a new client. So that's why in our calculator, and I'm going to get to that in a second. I'll give you a link. It's down here below, but I'll show you where it is. But that is why it's so important for you to plug in. It doesn't matter what marketing you're going to invest in. That is the first thing you need to understand is, hey, what is my client lifetime value? You start with that number, and then everything drives backwards from there in terms of what you can then afford to pay for every new client. Okay, so at Grow IT, our goal is to achieve qualified meetings. Again, qualified meeting is with a very specific ICP that has a very specific problem, and you have that very specific solution. So the goal is to get qualified meetings for under $200. Great to you, our client partners are getting anywhere between $50 and $500 cost per qualified meeting. The $500 is going after enterprise C-level clients. And so it's a little bit more expensive there, but let's just use that on the high end. So an example would be, right, if you had a $500 cost per qualified call and you had 10 meetings, that total of those 10 meetings is going to be $5,000, right? You apply a very conservative close ratio of 20%, and that, let's say, gets you 2 new clients. And again, if you have a $50,000, revenue that from those 2 clients, which, is essentially going to be, I guess, a $25,000, could be a $25,000 client lifetime value, then you can understand how the math works in terms of applying it. Now, in terms of once you find your winning campaign via ads, then it just becomes a predictable math equation for you, right? If you get, qualified calls for $500 each, cost per qualified call, you get 10 meetings, that total is $5,000, 20% close rate, 2 new clients, that total cost is $5,000, but your client acquisition cost, meaning the cost for each of those clients, is $2,500. But here's the thing. These are your numbers. Let me just put this over here so you can see. You plug in your numbers. We'll put this link. This is our calculator that we use. We'll put it in the link here in the video notes. But you put in your numbers. So whatever your client lifetime value is, if it's high, AI and IT consulting is typically pretty high. For managed service providers, it's usually a lot less. Okay, let's see. Let's be conservative and put 25,000. Let's see your B2B SaaS. I think it's about 25. Yep. 25,000. All right. Here's the cost of our 60-day accelerator. If you spend $100 a day in ad spend over that 60 days, that's going to be 6,000. So if you did the math, that's the 10,700 plus 6,000, 16,700. Now, I said earlier that we're shooting for a $200 cost per qualified call. Again, our clients are seeing between 50 and 500. Let's use the highest end. Let's use 500 as a cost per qualified call. Industry average on close percentages, sales close percentages is 25%. But again, let's be conservative and just say it's going to be 20%. So 2 out of 10, 2 out of the qualified meetings that you close, right? And then you just see the rest of your metrics will come out here, right? The projected revenue, the ROI, which typically is the first question people ask, is like, hey, will I see an ROI? And again, I always tell them, it's like, I don't know, you plug in your numbers here in terms of your client lifetime value. I'll tell you what you can expect from the paid ad side of things, and then you can determine if it's a good investment for you. And then you'll see down here your actual client acquisition cost. With these metrics here are about $7,000, $6,958, right? So then you can go, okay, great. I know that I can afford to pay $6,958 for every new client that's going to generate for me. Is that total revenue? It looks like it's total. So let's say $30,000, right? So $7,000 for every $30,000 in revenue. But again, this is where everything drives backwards from the client lifetime value. So whatever your client, the higher your client lifetime value, the much easier it is to make the math make sense for you. Because again, if you banked it on a cost per qualified call of $500, which our client who's going after enterprise level C-suite is finding, their client lifetime value is like $500,000. It's unbelievably high, right? So then you can see how the numbers will absolutely, it's a no-brainer to make sense. So anyway, my point in saying this is to go back to the question of how many leads you can expect. It really depends on these factors, but ultimately it comes down to what your numbers are in terms of your client lifetime value, driving everything backwards to that client acquisition cost, what it is that you're willing to pay to acquire each new client. So hopefully this is helpful. If you've got questions, want to discuss further, we're happy to help. Look forward to seeing you in the next video, and thanks so much for joining.